in the trial against Jennifer Crumbley, whose son Ethan killed 4 people at his high school back in 2021. Well, court is expected to resume today with jury deliberations. Joining us to shed light on this case and what we can expect is Michigan trial attorney Jamie White. Jamie, good morning to you. Thank you so much for waking up with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Of course, thanks for having me.
So a lot going on in this case. We initially saw Ethan, who was convicted, and then now his mother facing trial. It's all stemming from her being the reason he had the weapons in the first place. Can you give us the timeline of what brings us to this point and why his mother is now facing those 4 counts of manslaughter?
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we have here is a young man, which we've seen all over the country, take guns into the school and kill their fellow classmates for no reason at all. That unfortunately happened here in Michigan. The unique thing about this case is that they're trying to hold the parents responsible to some degree for his behavior. We've seen this happen in other sorts of cases where a parent may leave a weapon out and the young person gets a hold of it and shoots somebody intentionally or inadvertently. But the unique thing about this case is that there appeared to be warning signs that this young man had potential dangerous tendencies. And more importantly, the school contacted his parents just hours before this incident occurred. And yet there was no attempt to do anything about it. And so the question becomes, it's unique, is are we going to hold third parties, i.e. parents, for the intentional acts of their children? It's a unique question, and this case is going to bring it about to some degree.
Jamie, really quickly, I know you mentioned those warning signs, and actually Ethan's defense tried to use insanity and those type of things to get him off. But you mentioned those warning signs. They've had several people take the witness stand, including people who were saying, I think Ethan should come in for a mental evaluation. He needs to get to his appointments. And Jennifer was saying she was busy. She couldn't make those appointments. You raised that question also about parents being held responsible. At what point is it entirely on the parents? At what point is it entirely on the child when it comes to that age of understanding?
That is an excellent question, because that is really what this case is about. If this was a civil case, I actually participated in a case just like this, where a corrections officer left a weapon out, and the weapon was attained by a child who shot somebody. Liability there is pretty easy. It's pretty easy to make the decision that dad or mom did the wrong thing. The question here becomes, to your point, at what point does it become criminal? At what point do we take away people's liberty because of their negligence? And this is a novel question. I think the prosecutor has a tough case. I'm a gun owner. I don't take a position one way or the other, but there's no question that Ms. Crumbley and Mr. Crumbley were negligent. But were they so negligent that they also should lose their liberty? And that's a question the jury is going to have to address.
Closing arguments concluded Friday, and then you mentioned those jury deliberations, which begin today. For those unfamiliar with how court proceedings work, what will happen with those jury deliberations?
So the first thing is the judge is going to read instructions. I suspect that will take probably close to an hour. Some of the evidence that was introduced in this case was strange, as far as mom having affairs and spending time at her horse farm. It certainly doesn't go to the relevancy as to whether or not she knew or should have known her son was capable of committing these acts. So we'll have additional instructions for the jury to tell them that evidence was not important for the shooting, but to show some other reason the prosecutor will purport. Once the instructions occur, the jury will be given a short break and they will begin their deliberations. 5 will be dismissed. There'll be a jury of 12, and they will begin to make the decisions as to whether or not the legal standard of involuntary manslaughter has been met. And again, a very novel question. This is going to be a very difficult case for the jury. And win or lose, this case will direct prosecutors in other jurisdictions as to how to address these issues when parents ignore warning signs and provide access to weapons to young
As you
people.
No, I'm glad you stated that. That was actually going to be my next question. Knowing the severity of this case, we know sometimes school shooters aren't alive to even take the stand and explain these things. But in this case, the shooter's still alive and then convicted. How long do you expect these jury deliberations to take, knowing the severity of this case?
So that's a great question. So the facts in this case are straightforward. Nobody is disputing the facts, and that is often the case with these sorts of cases. Like, what color of shoes was this person wearing? Did they actually sell the drugs? And so on and so on. None of that is going to have to be discussed in this case. The real question is going to be the legal question that the court has already addressed to some degree, and that is whether or not this parent can be held legally responsible based on their actions, or in this case, lack of action. So, you never know with juries. It could take a while, but I think that this is a very conservative community. And I think that probably a lot of people have already made up their minds. And I'd be surprised if this lasted more than a day.
With your professional opinion, do you think the defense has done their job as far as, of course, we know that the parents gave the son the gun, but showing that emotional aspect? I know that was one key point that was important for making Jennifer not seem like she was wrong. Oh, she's the mother that did everything to save her child, and she never knew he would go to these lengths for this to happen. Do you think the defense has proven that, or do you think they still have work to do?
So, first of all, the defense doesn't have to prove anything, of course, but I think that Miss Smith, who I've known for a long time, I've been on opposite sides of the cases of her. I think she did a really masterful job at showing the jury that while this young man's behavior was troubling, and while maybe she should have done more, as parents, we could all find situations where that could occur. And if our child goes out and does something that she said was unforeseeable, should we as parents be held responsible? And I thought she did a fantastic job in her closing it, showing that Miss Crumbley's not perfect, but does she deserve to go to prison for her son's behavior that she clearly did not know was going to occur?
Jamie, as we look ahead, we know the father also in the spotlight with this case. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's been kind of a blame game. The mother saying the father should have done more. And then we know he will be in court around March. If this happens, do you think everything will be pinned on him, or both parties will need to be held responsible?
So it's a great question. So it's unusual to see defendants separated in trials such as this, unless there are what we call antagonistic defenses, as you described, pointing one finger at the other. It really depends on the outcome of this trial. As a defendant, you always want to go second or third, or however many defendants there are, because that is an indicator of what's going to happen in the future case. The prosecutor is going to have a very difficult decision to make in the event Miss Crumbley is acquitted, or even if she is not necessarily acquitted, but if the jury's out for days and days and days, it's going to indicate that she's had some challenges proving her case. And I expect that that could potentially be the case. So Mr. Crumbley will see his day in court likely, but the outcome of this trial, I think, will have a heavy indication of how the prosecutor approaches it going forward.
And Jamie, really quickly, a last question for you. If the parents are found responsible, can you see Ethan's attorneys trying to come back to reopen his case and be like, well, the parents are admitting this, this, and this. Could we possibly give him a lighter sentence, or is that not possible?
That is not legally feasible, in my opinion. There has been an appeal filed for the young man based on the fact that he's been sentenced to life in prison without parole. In Michigan, we go through a process to make a determination as to whether or not a young person is entitled to parole, or if he could be sent for life. He's been sent for life. So that issue is on appeal, but the fact that his parents are found guilty, in my opinion, has no legal bearing on the outcome of Ethan.
Jamie White, we appreciate you coming on Live Now from Fox. I will say, if people did not understand what was going on inside of the courtroom with Jennifer Crumbley, they definitely do now. You explained it thoroughly and very detailed. Thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, thank you for having me, and hopefully everybody pays attention to this particular issue. I think whatever the outcome is, what we're seeing is people are trying to be creative. Prosecutors and some members of Congress and so on are trying to find solutions to address this. And I think holding parents accountable to some degree is potentially an important part of that solution.
Jamie, thank you so much for coming on Live Now from Fox this morning. You enjoy the rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.